The sky was still dark when people began arriving. The morning air felt fresh and cold, but no one seemed to mind. It was not a normal day in the town. Something big was about to happen. Families walked toward the historic town square, carrying folding chairs and thick blankets. Little children held small British flags in their hands. Their eyes were full of excitement. The square, usually quiet, was slowly turning into a place of joy and energy. Mrs. Eleanor Hayes had been awake since 4 a.m. She was 78 years old and had lived in this town her entire life. Her small house stood just 20 meters from where the royal couple would appear. She had never seen a royal person in real life, not even once. But today that would change. Today, Prince William and Princess Catherine were coming to visit. Eleanor wore her best dress, a light gray one with a soft shawl. Her granddaughter Sophie helped her pack a basket with sandwiches, tea, and biscuits. Sophie smiled as she placed a small flag into the basket and said, "Let's make this day special, Grandma." Eleanor nodded. Her heart was already full. Her son David carried the folding chairs to the car. The drive to the square took longer than usual. The streets were packed with people. Cars were parked everywhere, even far from the center. Many families were walking long distances. Just to be part of this once-in-a-lifetime event, the town had been preparing for months. Lampposts were freshly painted. Shops had decorated their windows with red, white, and blue bunting. Flowers were planted in every corner. The cobblestone streets had been cleaned until they shined. Everything looked beautiful. Tommy Morrison, a 10-year-old boy, ran ahead of his parents. His cheeks were red from the cold and from excitement. His teacher had told the class about the royal visit, and Tommy had been talking about it every day. Since he dreamed of waving to the prince and princess, his mother Sarah called after him, telling him to slow down, but she laughed while saying it. She was happy to see her son so excited. Vendors stood by the sidewalks, selling royal souvenirs, toy crowns, and flag pins. Children pointed at shiny balloons and asked for treats. The mood was full of laughter, but also full of something deeper, something proud and hopeful. Officer Jenkins, a kind local policeman, helped people find good spots. He had served in this town for 20 years and had never seen it like this. "Feels like the whole country is here," he said to a colleague. But everyone was peaceful. There were no loud arguments, no pushing, just patience and smiles. The town square grew more crowded by the hour. People brought folding stools, small ladders, and even crates to stand on. Reverend Matthews opened the church early so people could use the restrooms and get warm drinks. He stood at the door offering kind greetings and handing out cups of water. "Today is a blessing," he whispered to himself. At 9:30 a.m., someone said they saw the royal convoy on the highway. The news spread like fire. People stood taller. Phones were raised. Children sat on their parents' shoulders to get a better view. The air was filled with soft murmurs and hopeful eyes. "They're coming," someone whispered. Little Amy Chen, only 6 years old, looked up at her grandmother and asked, "Is the princess here yet?" Her grandmother smiled, bending down to adjust Amy's dress. "Soon, my dear, very soon." Amy had been practicing her curtsy all week. She didn't understand royal life. She believed Catherine was kind and beautiful, just like the princess in her favorite storybook. Local business owner Robert Turner stood with his wife and 3 children. He had closed his shop for the day. His kids were more interested in their phones than the royal visit, but Robert didn't mind. "One day they'll remember this," he said quietly, holding his wife's hand. The sun was now high in the sky. The weather had been cloudy all week, but today the sky was bright and blue. Only a few white clouds drifted lazily above. Soft wind moved the flags and touched the faces of the waiting crowd. Everything felt perfect. At exactly 10:15 a.m., sound was heard from far away. The hum of police motorcycles. It grew louder. With each second, children began to jump in place. People pointed down the street. Excitement grew stronger. It's almost like a wave you could feel in your chest. Photographer Emma Collins stood near the front of the crowd. She held her camera tightly. Her hands were shaking. She had taken many pictures in her career, but today felt different. Today felt important. She adjusted her lens and whispered, "Please let me get the perfect shot." Mrs. Hayes stood close to her granddaughter, holding Sophie's hand tightly. "Are you ready, Grandma?" Sophie asked. Eleanor nodded, her eyes already wet with emotion. "I've waited my whole life for this," she said softly. Then came the sound of helicopter blades in the distance. News crews were filming from above. The sky seemed to sing as the sound echoed through the town. People cheered and waved their flags. Smiles filled the square. And finally, at 10:30 a.m., the first police motorcycle appeared around the corner. The crowd erupted in applause. Flags waved wildly. Cameras clicked. Phones recorded. People cheered not with loud voices, but with full hearts. The convoy followed. 3 black cars, shining like mirrors, rolled slowly down the street. Everyone leaned forward, hoping to catch a glimpse. Mrs. Patterson stood in her front garden, wearing a pearl necklace her husband had given her 40 years ago. She clutched it tightly, tears in her eyes. "This is a dream," she whispered. The middle car stopped near the center of the square. The crowd grew quiet. Phones were ready. Hearts beat faster. It was the moment they had all been waiting for. What happened next would touch every heart in the square. The crowd stood still. Thousands of people, young and old, were silent. The middle car of the royal convoy had stopped in the center of the town square. The air was full of excitement and something more, something magical. The tinted windows of the car reflected smiling faces, waving flags, and wide, hopeful eyes. Everyone held their breath. Then, the back door opened slowly. First came Prince William. He stepped out with a warm, calm smile. His navy blue suit looked sharp, but it was his friendly eyes that caught people's attention. He waved gently to the crowd, and immediately people clapped, cheered, and waved their flags higher. The silence broke into soft cheers and happy cries. Then Princess Catherine stepped out. She wore a light cream dress and a matching hat. Her hair was perfectly styled, and her eyes sparkled in the sunlight. But more than her looks, it was her gentle smile that touched the crowd. She turned toward the people and waved with grace and kindness. In that moment, something passed between her and the crowd, something real and deep. Elderly Mrs. Hayes clutched her granddaughter Sophie's hand tightly. Tears filled her eyes. "She's even more beautiful in person," she whispered. Her voice shook. Sophie looked up at her grandmother and smiled. "You made it, Grandma. You're really seeing them." Eleanor nodded slowly, unable to speak. Her heart was full. The royal couple began walking toward the crowd. There were no fences between them and the people. Now only a narrow open space, carefully managed by the royal protection team. But even the security officers were calm, watching quietly from the sides. They knew this moment was not about safety. It was about trust, love, and unity. William and Kate moved slowly, stopping to greet children first. Little Amy Chen stood with perfect posture, remembering her curtsy. Her grandmother gave her a small nudge. Amy took a step forward. The princess saw her right away, smiled, and knelt down. "Hello, sweetheart. You look lovely today," Catherine said softly. Amy curtsied perfectly, and the crowd behind her clapped. Catherine reached out and gave her a warm hug. Amy looked stunned, then smiled brightly.
Oh.
Her grandmother wiped away a tear. "She'll remember this forever," she said. Prince William moved toward an elderly man in a wheelchair. His name was Mr. Bailey, and he had served in the Royal Air Force many years ago. William shook his hand firmly. "Thank you for your service," he said with sincerity. Mr. Bailey nodded, his lip trembling. "It's an honor to meet you, sir," he whispered. Meanwhile, Catherine walked along the crowd, shaking hands, smiling, and speaking to each person as if they were the only one there. She paused to greet a mother holding a newborn baby. "How precious," she said, gently touching the baby's tiny hand. The mother looked at the princess with disbelief. "Thank you. Thank you so much," she whispered. Photographer Emma Collins stood at the edge of the action. Her camera clicked. Over and over, but her hands trembled. She had taken thousands of photos in her career, but nothing felt like this. She captured moments of joy, of pride, of true emotion. Each photo told a story, but Emma was so moved she nearly forgot to take a few. This is history," she said to herself, Tommy Morrison waved his flag wildly, jumping to be seen. William noticed and walked over. "Are you having fun today, mate?" he asked. Tommy nodded quickly, too excited to speak. "I told my whole class you'd wave too." "Me," he blurted out. William laughed. "Well, I guess I better keep my promise then." He gave Tommy a high five, and the crowd laughed and cheered. Everywhere the royal couple went, they left a trail of smiles, laughter, and even a few happy tears. Robert Turner stood with his wife and children. His teenage daughter finally put her phone down. She watched as Catherine approached, and something in her eyes changed. She reached out and said, "Thank you for coming here." Catherine smiled and said, "It's a pleasure. Your town is beautiful." Robert saw the look on his daughter's face. She understood now. This wasn't just a visit. It was a memory being made. Then came a moment no one expected. Mrs. Patterson, standing in her garden with her pearl necklace and purple dress, waved as the convoy passed. She had not expected them to stop, but they did. Prince William noticed the decorations. In her garden, the royal family photos, the flags, the flowers. He walked up to her gate. "This looks wonderful," he said. "Did you do all this?" Mrs. Patterson's hands shook. "Yes, I did it for you and your family," she said softly. Catherine joined him, smiling kindly. "Thank you for your love and care," she said. Then, to everyone's surprise, Catherine stepped forward and gave Mrs. Patterson a gentle hug. The old woman began to cry. So did many others watching. Even the security guards looked touched. At one point, the church bells rang again, not because it was the top of the hour, but because Reverend Matthews had decided the moment deserved. The bells added to the magic. They echoed softly through the square, mixing with the sounds of joy and cheering. People looked up, eyes wide, hearts full, and then the royal couple slowly returned to the car. But they did not rush. They turned one last time to wave at the crowd. Everyone waved back. Some clapped, some cried. Some just stood still, taking in every second. As the car doors closed and the convoy began to move again, the town square felt changed. It was no longer just a place. It was a memory, a feeling, a moment that would live forever. Eleanor Hayes leaned on her granddaughter's shoulder. Her face was wet with tears, but she was smiling. "I can go home now," she said. "That was everything I ever hoped for." And no one in the crowd would ever forget what they had seen. The black convoy rolled slowly out of the square, but the feeling it left behind stayed like sunshine on the skin. People stood in silence for a moment, not because anyone asked them to, but because their hearts were still full. It was like waking from a beautiful dream, but this dream had been real. Prince William and Princess Catherine had come, had smiled, had touched lives, and now they were gone, leaving behind a town that would never be the same. Mrs. Eleanor Hayes remained seated on her folding chair, holding Sophie's hand. She looked tired but deeply peaceful. "I never thought I'd live to see a royal this close," she whispered. "But I did. And not just feel." Sophie leaned her head on her grandmother's shoulder. "They felt like family," she said. Eleanor nodded. "They made everyone feel special." Around them, the crowd slowly began to move again. But nobody was in a rush to leave. Strangers who had stood beside each other for hours now talked like old friends. People shared what they had seen, who they had met, and what moment touched them most. Some cried quietly, others laughed with joy. The atmosphere was soft and full of something deep, something bigger than just a royal visit. Photographer Emma Collins stood by the edge of the square reviewing her photos. Her hands were still trembling. Each picture she had taken showed more. Then Fosse's it showed emotions. Little Amy's curtsy, Mrs. Patterson's hug, Mr. Bailey's salute, and the look in Catherine's eyes as she held a newborn. Emma had taken photos all her life, but she had never captured anything like this. "These aren't just pictures," she whispered. "These are memories." Nearby, young Tommy Morrison was talking nonstop. He gave me a high five, Mum. "Did you see? Prince William really talked to me." His mother Sarah laughed. "You'll be telling this story for the rest of your life," she said. Tommy grinned. "I already can't wait to tell my teacher." He ran ahead, Still waving his flag proudly, Mrs. Patterson had returned to her garden, still holding on to the hug from the princess. She sat on her porch swing, smiling at every person who walked past. "You're the lucky one today, someone," said. She just smiled and nodded. "No," she replied. "We're all lucky. We were all part of something beautiful." In the local church, Reverend Matthews stood at the door, still offering water and blessings to those walking by. He had seen many things in his years of service, but today had been different. "People found joy," he said to a young couple as they passed. "And where there is joy, there is God." Robert Turner and his family began packing their things. His teenage children, for once, weren't looking at their phones. They were talking about what they saw, how close they were, and how Catherine looked like a real-life queen. Robert smiled at his wife. "Maybe they'll understand it better when they're older," he said. His wife replied, "I think they understand more than you think." As the streets began to clear, volunteers from the town council started picking up litter and folding extra chairs. But even while cleaning, they were smiling. "This was worth every second of planning," said one of them, wiping sweat from his forehead. "We gave our town something to remember." One family from another village had driven for hours just to see the royals. As they loaded their car, the mother said, "We almost didn't come. It was so far," her husband nodded, "but now I'm glad we did. It felt like a piece of history." Their teenage son, who had been quiet the whole trip, finally said, "Can we come again next time?" Even the security team, once stiff and silent, looked relaxed now. One officer said, "That was the calmest crowd I've ever seen." Another replied, "That wasn't just security, that was connection." Those people were here for something bigger than protocol. They were here for heart. Later that evening, the town's local news showed clips of the visit. It was everywhere: TV, newspapers, social media. People saw themselves on screen, waving, smiling, crying. Children pointed at the television. "That's me," they shouted. Grandparents watched with full hearts, knowing they had witnessed something they could never fully explain at home. Mrs. Hayes gently placed her flag and her program from the day inside an old wooden box. She kept her best memories in that box: photos, letters, old ribbons. This day had earned its place inside. She kissed Sophie goodnight, then sat quietly by her window, looking out toward the street where the cars had passed. "Thank you," she whispered. In that same moment, far away in their own car, William and Catherine were also quiet. They'd seen the faces. They had felt the love. Catherine looked out the window and said, "That town, it was different. They weren't just looking at us. They were with us." William nodded. "It reminded me why we do this, why it matters." Back in the town square, the flags were still flying in the gentle breeze. The flowers remained fresh. The painted lamp posts stood bright under the evening sun. But what had truly changed wasn't the decorations. It was the people. They had come for a royal visit, but they left with something deeper. They left with stories, with memories, with a moment that touched every soul.